This is Maximilian Alvarez for the Real News Network and In These Times magazine, reporting from Hortonville, Wisconsin, a small rural town with a population just shy of 3,000. In 1974, the population of Hortonville was around 1,500, and yet it became the sites of one of the most contentious and consequential teacher strikes in Wisconsin's history. Over 80 striking educational staff members were fired by an intransigent school board, and the strike itself ripped the community in two. Between teachers and their supporters, local police, and townspeople opposed to the strike, things got very ugly here in Hortonville. And the legacy of the broken strike left a deep scar in the community for many years to come. Nearly 50 years after the Hortonville teachers' strike and 10 years after the passing of Act 10 under Republican Governor Scott Walker, which was a hammer blow to public sector unions around the state, teachers here are feeling the squeeze. I got to talk with Amanda and Jeff Frankel, two K-12 educators and AFT union organizers here in the Hortonville district, about the struggles they and their coworkers are facing and about the ways they are working together to rebuild.
I'm Amanda Frankel, and I've been teaching for 22 years, 20 at Hortonville and 2 years out of state. And currently I'm teaching Spanish at the elementary level, which is amazing and fun. And I'm also a reading teacher, and I teach that in the afternoons. So I have students grades K through 4. And Jeff?
I'm Jeff Franco. Same, teaching 22 years, 20 in Hortonville, 2 out of state. I teach high school math. So been having a fun time doing that. And I also coach softball, and I've coached pretty much most sports.
And you've been coaching your entire career. He started coaching in college, coaching baseball.
And then down in Missouri, coach football, and then coach football here, and baseball, and softball, and basketball, and I've done it all.
All right. And yeah, I mean, right before we got here for this interview, you were at a game, right?
Yeah, we were just at a game. We won 3-1.
Boom. Nice. Well, y'all were in Missouri before this, right? So I guess I'm curious if you've been teaching here for 2 decades, what was the path that brought you from Missouri over to Hortonville, of all places?
Well, actually, after we graduated college, we decided, let's just go have some fun. So we were newly engaged and wanted to go out of state. So we literally, seriously just applied at all the warm states. Mm-hmm. And whichever states got back to us first, that's where we went and taught. And my rule was we needed to be teaching in the same area together. So that was a dream of mine, to be in the same area together. And then we decided that when we were ready to settle down and start our family, we would find the perfect town. And so 2 years later, I was probably readier a little faster than you were. But so we need to go back home because our family's up here a couple hours away. But Hortonville was the perfect match for us.
As a Southern Californian who's lived in the Midwest, I can't blame you for for wanting to spend some time in a warmer part of the country.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I guess also, like, did y'all both know, like, from an early stage that you wanted to be teachers? Is that how you two met?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I always knew I was going to be a teacher. I was helping out in high school at the elementary and did all those kinds of things and did daycare and babysitting. And but when we went to University of Eau Claire, and we met during our teacher education classes. So.
Yep.
Give me more of that story. Who put the moves on whom?
It was actually one of our friends that hooked us up together.
Oh, nice.
One of our dear friends who teaches in Menominee. We had a winter class because we were that studious that we took classes all summer and in the winter, during the winter term and January classes. And yeah, his friend Chad said, "You guys like each other, just go out already." After we spent like every day for 3 weeks in this class together. So finally we went out on a date, and that's history. So he takes all the credit for hooking us up because I don't know if we would have said much to each other.
Oh, that's cute. And you said that you all have family in the kind of northern part of Wisconsin?
Yeah, we looked in the Fox Valley. We knew that this area was growing quite a bit. I had a girlfriend that lived in Greenville who I went to high school with. So we were best friends. And she said, if you want to come teach Greenville, is happening. It's growing. It's getting bigger and bigger. So when it was time to move back, we moved back to this area, but we had family within an hour. Like, I really wanted to be closer to family, like an hour away.
Mm-hmm.
And he said within a couple hours. So that was our compromise.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Can we talk more about that process, right? Was when you said, okay, we're going to move back to Wisconsin. You had a friend in Greenville saying this is the happening place. But like, I mean, Hortonville is pretty rural, right? It's, this is my first time here, and we drove kind of far away from the city to get here. So I guess could you talk us through like what it was like between the two of you as you were looking for where you wanted to plant your roots, start a family, and also like become like a teacher and build a career in that community?
So we came back home and we applied in the Fox Valley in general, but Hortonville attracted us because it was a big little town. I'm from a very small town. My town was barely 1,000 people growing up, and he was from Merrill, which was bigger.
Well, it was about the same size as us.
Mm-hmm.
As this. And so we were attracted by the feel of the community. And then, we applied at all these places in the Fox Valley, and then we went out to dinner after all of our interviews. And the waitress said, "Oh, you're dressed up. What's a special occasion?" Like anniversary, all this stuff. We're like, "No, we interviewed for teaching positions in the area, and we have offers at these places, and we're not really sure where we want to take." And she said, "Oh my gosh, my kids go to Greenville. You're going to love it here. Like, Hortonville Area School District is amazing. You're going to love it. And we wouldn't change it for the world." And for me, that kind of sealed the deal.
Yeah, and I think, because I had an offer in another school, but there I would have been, I would have had a classroom, but during my prep time, I would have had an office. I would have shared an office. And at my job in Missouri, I was a traveling teacher. So I had my first year teaching, I had 4 different classrooms for 6 classes. And then my second year teaching, I had 2 classrooms, and I didn't have my own room. But in Hortonville, I was guaranteed a room, and I had my own room the whole day. So, I mean, that was one of the biggest deciding factors of, do I have my own room, or do I have to share or travel? So
I know. Go, please.
Well, because then he was offered that position because he was teaching math, and math teachers are a little bit more in demand than elementary teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I said, well, if he's going to teach there, our plan, because we were newly married and wanted to build a family in the community, I wanted to make sure that wherever we stayed, that this was a lifestyle choice, because I was adamant that we were going to raise our family in this community and that we were going to do it together. And we'd have the same teaching schedules, same calendars. And so I wanted to be hired in the same district. So I told them they could not hire him unless there was something available for me, because we had other options. And then luckily there was a limited term position that got my foot in the door. So that was very helpful. And we've been here since 2001.
That's great. I mean, it just makes me think that, like, there's so many other jobs where that's not even an option, right? Like to kind of see your career in those terms. Like, because as a teacher, as we were kind of talking about before we started recording, right? It's like you were actually seeing generations of the community that you're in grow up. You're getting to know them. You're getting to know their families. Like, educators are some of the most kind of deeply entrenched kind of workers in any community, right? And that's something that, in so many other jobs, you have no attachment to the people, right? You just go to an office building. I mean, or maybe when I was a delivery guy, I would meet the regular people who would order pizza, right? So I got to know them well, but I wouldn't say I was a fixture in the community when I was delivering pizzas. And so I kind of wanted to ask, by way of talking about kind of how your working life has gone in Hortonville and maybe how it's changed over the years, like what that kind of community aspect, like what that looks like for a teacher in a place like Hortonville. Like, could you just talk a little more about what it means to both of you to be part of that community and why it was such an important part for you when you decided to move here?
I think for me, I just want to be part of the community because I feel like it takes a village to raise a child, and I feel like they're all our children. So to me, that was very important, and I wanted my children to grow up with strong role models. And I was able to get that through neighbors who were also teachers in the building, who also maybe went to the same church as us or their friends at other churches. And like for Jeff, I've seen it over the years, that community that he's built with his players. Mm-hmm. Because like you've said before, when you have your players on the field, you have that relationship in the classroom too, and that carries over. I think that's huge for teachers. So if kids know that you're part of the community and you're invested in them and you know their parents, they're going to work and do their very, very best for you every single day.
Well, and I know that, you know, as y'all know, like part of why we're here in Hortonville, right, is to, you know, look at like the history of the teacher strike that happened here in 1974, right? What that meant to the community. And I know that kind of for folks who are watching this, I would highly encourage you to research that history. But, you know, that was always kind of a fundamental tension in that history, was that, you know, I think at the time in 1973 and here in Hortonville, there was a big split between kind of, you know, the more kind of farming community, the people who live more in town, and then the teachers in the school district, who at the time, I think it was around 3/4 of them did not live in the district. And so there was, especially at the time of the strike, when those tensions were running high, people were saying, oh, you're not part of the community, you know, you're outsiders, so on and so forth. So I know that is kind of something that is, you know, deeply entrenched in the history of Hortonville itself. But yeah, I mean, you know, you're right. I think about my coaches. My dad was a coach for us. And, you know, even today, if I go back home, I see people I grew up with who ask me about my dad, right? Or if they see my dad, they tell him about what they're up to, right? And what they're doing. But it really is, yeah, I love the way you put it, Amanda. It takes a village to raise a child. And I don't know. I guess I wanted to ask kind of like what that looks like on a day-to-day level as you're teaching, right? I mean, because you also have to deal with a lot of school children or high schoolers, and they're not always the most pleasant. I say that as someone who was not a very pleasant high schooler. Mm-hmm. So could we talk a little bit about from the time that y'all got here 20 years ago, you know, maybe to now, like, you know, what your sort of work in the Hortonville School District looks like? Like, what's a typical week been for you? Like before the pandemic?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of work at school. I mean, you're there for many hours, and then, like in my situation, like tonight, I got home after 7:00, and you know, and just luckily this year, you know, my daughter's with me on my team, but you know, you miss out on some things, and you know, my other son, he's in baseball, so I end up missing some of that, and so you know, it's, you know, you're putting in many times 12-hour days during the week, and you know, just.
I do remember when Jeff has coached his entire life. So if he wasn't playing sports, then he was coaching. He went right from playing to coaching. So even in college, he was coaching high school teams. Just, I think even on a volunteer basis, weren't you? Or you maybe had like an internship.
I did. It was volunteer, but yeah.
Yeah. So when we had 3 children, and when the first 2 were very small, I remember when you coached basketball, winters are brutal and cold, and kids cry a lot. And there was nights he was not, you know, because basketball, you'd have like 2 or 3 games a week. And when your family is young and you have these teachers who are trying to raise a young family, but yet, you know, they're coaching, which is great because they should be the ones coaching. I mean, the kids respond to them, and it's their passion. You love it. But it does take a toll on the family. And there's many nights when I was waiting for him to get home. Like, here's the baby. Welcome home, Daddy. And I remember, like, we had to make an agreement because he was coaching 3 sports. And I could not be a coach's widow all year. Mm-hmm. So eventually then he tapered down and just did the spring sports. But it's hard because it is fun. You want to be there, but you can't do it all. You can't have it all at the same time, I guess, maybe. You can do it all, but maybe over time.
Yeah.
And what about for you teaching elementary Spanish? Is that, Is that what you've been teaching for the majority of the past 2 decades?
Well, that's kind of funny because I keep going back to school and getting more licensures and more degrees because I enjoy learning. And so I started out teaching middle school Spanish and language arts, and then I switched to teaching 4th grade of regular elementary, which was amazing. And then there was an opportunity to teach ELL in Spanish, which was amazing. And then we built a new school, and they asked me to teach the Spanish there, and I also have a reading degree, so I teach reading half-time too. So I've been a lot of different places. It's been great because it's been a good experience, and I think out of the 5 buildings in our district, I've taught at 4 of them.
Wow.
But it's been interesting because I can see kind of the inner workings of the system and people and administration and other colleagues, and it's been great.
Can we talk about that since you've been in all corners of the district, or almost all corners? I guess for folks who have never been to the Hortonville district, or who have really know what kind of like the school system in a more rural district looks like, what does the district here kind of look like? What are those 5 buildings that you were talking about?
We have 1 high school. It used to be a K through 12 building. We've grown so fast that now we have 3 elementary buildings, 2 middle schools, and the high school. The nice thing about, they're growing. They're still growing. Our enrollment's high. Up every year. But I like the way it's set up at Hortonville. We have the 3 buildings on the same campus, so the high school, the middle school, and the elementary, and they work really well together. You have middle school kids going over to the elementary to help. You have middle school kids going up to the high school to take high school classes. You have high schoolers going down to elementary and middle to mentor. So that's amazing. And then the Greenville side, we have 2 elementaries in Greenville. The first Greenville Elementary and then North Greenville. And Greenville Elementary has a middle school next to it. And they keep passing referendums. And the growth projectile is insane, and I don't know what they're going to do for the next building. But
is the growth like kind of a population boom, or is the district itself just expanding? Or both?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I think there's, because from what I understand, like the Appleton area or somewhere around there, they're landlocked, so they're not allowing more students to come in. But Hortonville's taking them all in, and so everybody's building on the outskirts of Appleton, which is Greenville.
And Greenville has the space to build.
Right.
And then we also, and then we have Ellington has space to build, the town of Center, so everyone's kind of building out. Taxes are a little lower in Ellington. I think Greenville, the location, because it's close to Appleton, a lot of families work in Appleton. And I do feel like that people are attracted to Hortonville and Greenville because it's still that big little town. Like they still have that little town feeling. It's very family focused, and but it's big enough where your kids have a lot of opportunities. We teach Spanish we start at 2nd grade.
Yeah, that's better than I had. And I grew up in Southern California.
That's a luxury. There's not a lot of buildings that do that. And I think a lot of the things that they offer, even at the middle school and the high school, the programs that they offer, being considered a small town. Hortonville is maybe, 1,500 people? But that's not our student enrollment is pretty big. So they have a lot of good course offerings.
Well, not to make you be like census takers or anything, but I guess could you say a little about what the kind of community here is like? Is it, are a lot of people farmers? Are they working in Appleton and their kids are going to school here? I guess just to give people a little sense of the place and the community that you're working within, people who've never been to this part of the country.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It'd be more, because I think there's, if you're in Hortonville, there's more. It used to be a bigger farming community. I don't know if it's as big anymore. With Greenville, there's more people that I think that work more in Appleton, and so they're
More entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Things like that too.
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences too with the two.
I think the difference too is that Hortonville has generations and generations and generations of people here. So when they feel something, they feel it deep. And then Greenville, just like us, are people that have all been transplanted in because they see the area, it's growing, it's right outside of Appleton, but still has that small town feeling. There's plenty of land to build yet, and they have options. They can build on 3 acres, or they can build on a half acre. They can build on a quarter of an acre.
Yeah, Greenville's grown up a lot because we used to come here for Thanksgiving shopping when I was younger, and it was just fields in the Greenville area. There was really nothing there, and now it's just so.
It's booming.
Like you said, there's a lot more history in Hortonville, that Hortonville area, city compared to Greenville, where it keeps growing, and so you get a different.
I think sometimes when decisions are made or they're talking about the expansion of towns or combining, because the 2 towns are combining for the high school, I think sometimes there are differences of opinions because of where people come from and the history that they have and that they know. So people from Hortonville have been here for how many generations, and Greenville people have been here for maybe 1.
So does that like come out? And because I guess that would normally be a situation where, thinking in sports terms, you would go to the neighboring town to play in football and you'd have that rivalry. But in like a school district where you include both of those, does that kind of show up in the classroom or on the school grounds? I
don't really notice it in the classroom. I know I don't even notice it in the field, in sportings, but I do hear it from people like parents, and they always say, well, we have Greenville students and they're playing over to Hortonville students, or vice versa. As a coach, I don't even know where these kids are from.
There's little whisperings.
There's
whisperings. Like our daughter is a senior in high school, and they had prom, and all the kids got together, got a big bus. They rented it, 40 some kids. And they went to the Paint Art Center and took pictures. And then, they were like, oh, come on, so-and-so, get in the picture. And she goes, oh, I'm not even Hortonville. And I was like, oh, because the adults don't hear it necessarily, but there's something ingrained in them that they still, even the 17-year-olds are separating themselves between Greenville and Hortonville. And she didn't feel like she should be in the picture.
Right, because they started out in like at Greenville Middle School or Hortonville Middle School. So then when they combine at the high school, they've already established their friends and.
Yes.
So.
And in middle school, the sports teams play against each other because they need more kids to play. So that makes sense, but we're all going to be on the same team. So yeah. And then I think it trickles down from the parents, again, making the decisions because,
Well, I think, like, not to kind of project too much, onto Hortonville itself, but I just know that having kind of just been obsessed with the kind of history, not only of the strike, but, of educators in this district and kind of how the relationship between, teachers like yourselves and the surrounding community have evolved over the decades. Like, one thing that I kept hearing from interviews that people did or articles that were written or footage that I saw is that people in Hortonville proper for a long time were still very, they didn't want to talk about the strike, right? It left a deep scar on the community, right? And like you're saying, that history goes deep and it means a lot to people. And I think that not like it necessarily kind of shows up in an everyday sort of way, but I do think that, there are traces of it even in the ways that, the local kind of the fact that like the kind of education association locally here and the school board like wouldn't even kind of reach a kind of full contract or like for decades, right after the strike. And so I guess I kind of wanted to what I'm trying to say is kind of bring us up more to kind of present day and ask about, the elephant in the room, which is kind of Act 10. Like we're talking here 10 years after the passing of Act 10, right? Which was more or less a nuclear bomb dropped on not just educators in the state, but all public sector workers. And, it's really that history, right? Has shaped how you work and how you and your coworkers work around the state. So that's all a long way of kind of setting us up to maybe talk about, moving from Hortonville, moving from 1974 in Hortonville to 2011 in Wisconsin, where in a lot of ways, kind of the lessons of Hortonville on how to break workers, right? How to impose your will upon working people was really taken statewide by Scott Walker and those other pieces of shit. Pardon my French. I don't mean to swear in your house, but I know that y'all were saying that you were there in Madison, right, when all this was going on. Could you take us kind of back to that? Like, what was it like? What brought you out there? Were you kind of political people before that, or was this something that just really kind of you knew that you had to kind of go and be part of?
Yeah, well, I really wasn't too much into politics, but I was the union treasurer for I've been over 15 years now, 17 years probably, but I was involved in the union always, but I didn't do a lot. But when that happened, it was just one of those things that, I hopped on one of the first buses that they had, and I went down there because I just knew I felt it was really important because they were just stripping teachers' rights away and, going after our salary. And I just felt it was very important to be down there. And I was down there multiple times, and, one of the times there was over 100,000 people there. And it was not only, I felt important to be there, but it was cool to see. Mm-hmm. And it was cool to see one of the times one of the high schools down in Madison, they had a bunch of students walk out, and they were marching alongside us. And it wasn't just teachers there, it was kids there, and it was parents there. And, I just felt it was, it's one of those once in a lifetime things to witness, and, was hoping for a better outcome, but I don't think we had a choice in what was going to happen. Because it really, going off on coming after teachers, I know Walker talked about balancing the budgets, and people always think, oh, he balanced the budget. Well, it was our salaries that balanced the budget. I look back at it, and, both of us being teachers, we get hit doubly hard because we lost, I looked at it, over $6,100 in take-home pay that year. And people say, and the biggest thing they say is, well, they had to pay their 5.5% towards retirement because the school board was paying that. Well, that was always negotiated into our contract and our salary. So we took less of a salary, so that would be going towards our retirement. And we always took less salary because we wanted better insurance. So teacher salary was lower compared to pretty much all my friends that graduated with degrees that went into the private sector. So they're making twice as much money as me, but I knew I had good insurance. I knew I had a good retirement. And then they took that away, but, and I'm fine with paying 5.5%, just like the private sector. But the problem is, at the time, they didn't compensate us for that. So we lost money. And that's what really gets me is I took a huge pay cut to balance that budget. So it really wasn't Walker that did it. It was you and I and all the other teachers that did that, and all the public workers. And then I look back at my old pay stubs, and it took me over 7 years to get back to a comparable salary of take-home pay that I did before Act 10. So I lost 7 years of salary. Plus the raises each year. So, they gave us raises, but that 5.5%, that was a big chunk. So that was a huge pay cut in salary. So to take that, one teacher, I'm sure in a family had, it's not that big of a deal, but when you have two teachers in a family, it's a big deal. And so that's one of the biggest reasons I went down to Madison. And, I had friends down there. We would meet up and we'd walk around, the whole day. And, it was nice to see. It was neat to see, but there was a lot of a lot of hatred towards us. I remember going down with Amanda and I and our two kids, and my daughter made a little sign and something about teachers. I don't remember exactly what. And we put it in our car, and we had somebody drive by us, honked at us, and flipped us a bird with my kids in the car, just because of a little sign in the.
She was like 7.
Yeah, and I'm thinking. And we had no idea. We were just thinking, really? This is that big of a deal? I mean...
I felt a little naive going down there. But I think for me, too, I am a little bit more naive about things. And I just was in disbelief. Like, they can't do this. They're not going to do this. And this is going to affect us forever.
Because I assumed that everybody was like, oh, everybody likes teachers. And
I think for me, that was like the most emotional part. Like, I feel like I got punched in the gut because I felt like, what do you mean? I'm in a noble profession and I choose this because I choose my community. I'm not choosing it to make money. I'm not choosing it other than I want to be in a community. I want to raise my children. I want all the stakeholders in the community. I want us all to take care of each other. And I thought I was doing a job that everyone respected and wanted. And I've always felt a lot of love and support from the community from that, and students and children and families. But that to me was, like I said, I was just in disbelief. Like, they're not going to knock down us teachers. Like, we're on the same team, right? And I felt that it was hard. And then too, for us, we just felt like it was an opportunity to teach our children. Our daughter was 7 at the time. She was asking a lot of questions. She's very inquisitive. And we were going to take her with us on this journey because we wanted her to grow up knowing that if things are not right, you need to advocate for yourself, and you need to advocate for others who are not able to, and show that support for one another. So it's a good family memory. But
would you say that, I mean, because I know that, one of the reasons that Scott Walker was even elected in the first place, right, was, people, not just in Wisconsin, but all over the country, all over the world, really, were hurting from the recession.
Yeah, and
right?
he said he was going to do brown bag lunch every time and drive his car.
Right, yeah, but, Mr. Tighten the Belt. Yeah, was, really kind of rode that wave of fear, anxiety, anger, pain, resentment. My own family lost everything in the recession. We lost the house that I grew up in the recession, right? So, like, I remember what that was like, right? This time 10 years ago, I was working as a temp 12-hour days in factories and warehouses in Southern California just to try to kind of like stay afloat, right? And so it seems like Walker, the media, and a number of other kind of actors were really able to weaponize that and say, look, we know everyone's hurting and we can balance the budget. The people who are keeping us from balancing the budget, it's not the corporations, it's not the banks, it's not all the big entities that are getting the vast lion's share of public money. It's teachers who are getting pensions off of your dime. So I guess what I'm asking is, like, having been teachers in Hortonville for 20 years, do you think that it was like, did you notice that shift after the recession, that it was a really kind of anger targeted towards teachers? Or was it like that you saw this kind of deep resentment towards teachers that just happened to kind of emerge during Act 10?
For me, I felt like it gave people that we know, friends of ours, an excuse to be like, no, it's you guys. You need to pay your fair share, like to I don't know, validate what they want, what they wanted. Like, they thought they should make more money, so we should pay more money, or I don't know. But I was shocked because we had good friends of ours that were listening to all that other side of the media or the news or Fox News or whatever. Oh my gosh. And so I feel like that they felt like they had this power then to say anything they wanted to us, and that they felt like they were in the right because someone breathed out loud the words that they thought one time, and then it gave power to them. And again, I was like in disbelief, like, what are they talking about? What are we doing? Like, you were just praising me for spending all these hours with your child because he can't read or whatever. And now all of a sudden you're like slashing me down and are angry because you think I make too much money and I'm a teacher. Right. Like, I was like in disbelief, and I just couldn't make sense of it personally.
That was the biggest thing when they keep saying, oh, you get good insurance and you get a good pension and that, but they don't realize they make twice as much as I do.
And that's the difference.
Yeah.
Like, our friends are making 6 figures each, right, in a household. So maybe they don't get that.
And it's not in every case, but I mean, it's.
But I'm just saying, like, they would have more money to put money aside for those things, for insurance. Like, okay, like one friend is an entrepreneur, right? So maybe they don't. So she only works because she needs to carry insurance, and then he doesn't have insurance. But my point is, like, they make more money so that if they don't have insurance through their company, they're putting money away because they make so much money that they put money away for those things that come up, where we just have it as part of our contract that's put away for us, right?
Right.
Like, we don't make enough money that I could separately put away extra money for insurance.
Yeah, because our insurance is part of our salary. I mean, that's.
Well, I mean, I think, also it's like, it's a testament to the fact that even the concept of a pension seems so foreign to so many people. And so when you have eroded things that should be fundamental rights and expectations of working people, so much so that the few people who actually have those things that unions fought for to provide, everyone kind of looks at them and says, like, oh, they're getting special treatment. It's like, no, we're all getting screwed over. Like, you should have this too. Like, I'm not the villain here. But that, I guess, it's just a kind of a testament, like I was saying, to the fact that eroding so many of the supports that working people should have leaves like a huge red X on your back if you're a public sector worker or a unionized worker who actually has a pension.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's really, really sad. And go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, like, I feel bad for other generations that are coming up because union workers have worked really hard and have fought to have the rights that they have. And my worry was that they're stripping away these rights. And now my nieces and nephews are going into the same workforces, like being educators and whatnot. And they wouldn't know the difference. Like, they were so excited to go save the world and teach all the children. And they wouldn't realize, like, yeah, you should have a 30-minute lunch. They should not cut it to 16 minutes and think that's okay. Or, any of those things. Like, or, I felt bad, like, at age 25, this young teacher should not feel like she's losing it or is not, what's the word? She's not capable because they have her on an overload work schedule and she sees other teachers doing it. Because it's like, no, that should not be that way. You should not be working 7 class periods a day without a prep, or 8 class periods without a prep. But they wouldn't know the difference if they just went in education and started doing it.
Right.
So I think the older veteran teachers need to speak up and help them and show them, because they wouldn't know the difference. And they're just going to take the job because they love teaching. And they'll just assume like that's the way it is. And it's not like that. It shouldn't be like that. They can't function like that.
Well, so, I mean, I think that's like kind of a perfect segue to talking about what it's been like after Act 10, right? Like, both from the teaching side, but also from the union side, right? Because, Jeff, you were talking about what Act 10 meant in terms of, quote unquote, balancing the budget. But there were also very clear union busting provisions baked into Act 10. Then, a couple years later, you had right to work. So I guess could we talk about, from the union side, you both being organizers with the union, what Act 10 kind of changed for you and your ability to do your job as organizers and as teachers?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that, we've lost a lot of members because we're not able to go to the negotiation table with the school board anymore. We would, when I was on the negotiation team, it was always, we would bargain for things in our contract, as far as, could be anything from working conditions to salary. Salary was always the biggest thing, but, just language in the contract. And so we would always talk with the school board. So we would always be together and we would, we'd go back and forth and we would come up with a compromise. And we'd do that every year, but now we can't even talk to the school board. We can't do anything. So a lot of our union members have dropped because of the school board is going to give us a salary no matter what. They're at the end of the year. They, in September, they'll tell us, all right, this is how much you're going to make extra this year.
They feel less empowered.
Yeah.
So I feel like they were feeling a little defeated. So we've been working to raise our membership numbers again, but that really did hurt our union quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we went from 100% to, maybe a fourth, 25, 30%. And so, and that was the biggest thing that they wanted, was to just go after unions and bust them up because they felt they had too much power. And with anything, you have power in numbers. But when they get rid of those numbers, they have the power. And that just took away everything. I mean, our school, our district, our superintendent, he's done a really nice job. He does have he has a handbook committee that we do talk about handbook. So we come up with suggestions, and then they take it back to administrators, and then they decide whether yes or no. So we do get suggestions on that, but it's
our current superintendent. This was not the case the previous superintendent administration. Our superintendent now is doing his best to make things right, but even for him, his hands are tied, and it's hard for him to make up for all that last time. But he sees it, he acknowledges it, he's doing the best he can, but it's hard. He knows it's hard.
So, we're lucky that we have a good superintendent that sees that, and I could definitely see how if you do have the wrong superintendent in your school, you're out of luck. I mean, they're going to take it, I could see them taking advantage of every little thing that they can. I don't think they would, but there's nothing stopping them from doing it. But like I said, our superintendent, he does a nice job with everything, but really our salary is lagging because they've increased the front end of it. So when you get hired, we're one of the top paying districts for beginning teachers. But after Act 10, they got rid of all our steps. So pre-Act 10, we would always be able to have a salary schedule, and we'd have lanes. So it encouraged you to go back and get your master's. So you would go back, get education, which helps you in the classroom. Post-Act 10, our district got rid of the lanes and everything. So there's really no incentive to go back to get your master's anymore, which I think hurts the students. And so those newer teachers, they come in a high salary, but they're stuck. I mean, you get your percent increase of whatever they give you, and they try to do the best they can, but you're pretty much stagnant for, if you're starting at, let's say, just 43,000 as a beginning teacher, it might take you 7-8 years to get to 50,000. And when you compare that to what it was pre-Act 10, or just with, I always look at it as people who have the same degrees, and you go to college for your specific area. I mean, a lot of kids are coming out of college, going to, the workforce. They start at 50, and then a couple of years, 60, 70, 80, it just keeps going up quicker.
Yeah, that was like the saddest realization when I had a girlfriend of mine. She was close to retirement age. She was maybe like 3 years away from retirement, and her son had got his first job out of college, and he was making well over her salary that she'd been making close to retirement. And he was 25 years old.
Yeah, and like you were saying, it's like the starting salary is attractive, but then you basically get kind of stuck in that.
Right.
And then you add on top of that everything else that you were talking about. Like, again, the whole marketing of Act 10 is a balancing the budget thing. Mm-hmm. It's like if you look at the actual details, not even the fine print, if you just actually look at the thing, It's like, well, no, that was a pretext to bust unions. That was a pretext to make workers more like less empowered, like you were saying, like to give workers less power, to make workers more exploitable, more quote unquote flexible. Because then you also have these provisions where Act 10 not like limited what you could bargain for, like you were both saying. It made unions have to recertify themselves every year, not with a majority of the people who voted, which is normally what happens in union elections, but the majority of a membership, right? So you're essentially like you're stacking the deck, you're baking into the process what you know are going to be mechanisms that are going to reduce union membership, union density. And it's been borne out.
And they charge you to do it too. And they charge you to try to recertify. So you have to pay to recertify. You know, and we tried to do that the first couple of years, and I think it was like $200 or $400. And we just don't have that kind of money to do that every year for our union dues. It's like...
Well, and then also, like you were saying, you guys are teachers, you have families, you're coaching. If you're going to like get 50% of your membership to vote when they need to every year, that also takes a lot of work, right? So in a way that's also labor that you're kind of doing for free. And so, I mean, I think, you know, we painted the picture enough for people to know Act 10 did a lot of damage, and it did a lot of intentional damage to workers like yourselves and people across the public sector. And we know that it has made things incredibly hard for people to organize, for workers to band together, to demand what they deserve. And I think that, you know, in the 10 years since the passing of Act 10, right, a lot of unions have been doing soul searching. A lot of organizers have been trying new tactics to try to kind of adjust to these conditions and to rebuild the power that they had lost. And so I wanted to kind of ask you all about that. Like, you know, how have you built out of the rubble? How have you adjusted? Like, what are things looking like now?
I feel like a few years ago, when the teachers were really like at their wits' ends and really like, this cannot be happening to us, because we're part of the community and because we live here and our lives have grown up here and our children, and we know neighbors and friends. There was a couple people in the community that stepped up and said, this is not okay. And we're like, we know, like, yes, please. Like, and they said, well, just tell your bosses, tell your principals. And we're like, it doesn't work that way, you know? So, then one mom said, a friend, obviously, said, well, I'm going to run for the school board. And we said, okay. And she was like, really? And we're like, yes, like, that's what we need, because you have seen it. You've seen it on both ends. Like you see what we're going through. We're not lying to you when we're telling you these things, but the way it's portrayed through the school board or the school notes or the website or the notices, it's not always what it seems to be, even though everyone is trying to do their very best and they have good intentions, but there's some information lost in translation. So she was like, all right. So she had no experience in local politics, but she said, I want to do this for you teachers, because I know that every single one of you is coming from a good place, and I know that you're here for our children. So as a union, we decided to back her. We had our representatives from the area come and help us organize as a local union. We spent nights in her house talking about our voters lists. Everyone speak to 5 people. We did the going from door to door, knocking on doors. And we really lifted her up. The person that she was going to take the seat on, he had been there for, I don't even know, maybe 20 years. Fantastic, I'm sure. But we just knew that we needed to put someone on that school board that had a bigger picture than what they had been told for maybe 10 or 20 years. And she was really willing to learn and just take it all in and try to do what was best for all of our students and our children in the community. And then we also had another gentleman step up who was married to a teacher who might or might not have been just tired of her complaining and just seeing her like go through this and just not understanding what was going on. So we offered him our support as well. And so we were very fortunate that year that both of those people that stepped up made it on the school board, and I felt like we flipped it there. So I feel like for us, for having a smaller union and for a union that was unfortunately decreasing in size a little bit because of the Act 10, we stepped up. We put our time where our thoughts were, and we made it happen. So we felt pretty good about that.
Hell yeah.
What she said.
And I mean, when you're talking about, like, you know, the things that people saw yourselves and your fellow coworkers kind of struggling through, right? That's everything that we've been talking about, right? That's questions of pay. That's, you know, the lack of ability to bargain in good faith with the school board itself, to really have a say in your workplace. But there's also things that, you know, have kind of, we've touched on a little bit, but there's like teaching loads, right? There's the amount of prep time that you can have for, you know, preparing for teaching 7 periods in a row, right? So there are a lot of things that are kind of baked into that exhaustion and frustration and kind of the daily grind of being an educator. But, you know, I think that, you know, what's really, I think, incredible when you take that sort of long historical view, especially when we're talking about Hortonville, right? I mean, because that strike in 74, it did not end well, right? Like Act 10, right? It's a real painful memory for the movement, right? I mean, you had over 80 teachers who were fired by that school board because the school board would not bargain in good faith with them. They were intransigent. Every time the teachers tried to offer a compromise, they would just say, no, take what we offered or leave it. When the teachers were getting more and more fed up with their high teaching loads and everything like that, they authorized a strike. And then Hortonville, unlike so many districts around the state, took the extreme step to fire everybody. Things got uglier from there. But the point that I'm making is that for years and even decades after that, teachers in this district, like, there was no negotiation between them and the school board. There was an iron wall, more or less, between the two. You only really had kind of a neutral outside arbitrator was the only reason why anyone had a contract in this district to begin with, until like the 21st century, when you two kind of came in, when you had this kind of, hopefully a bit of a turning of the page into a new era for this district, where teachers could bargain and rebuild some semblance of a union, only to kind of have the wind knocked out of you with Act 10, right? So it's like you just got a kind of footing to kind of rebuild after the long process of healing from Hortonville, and then Act 10 comes along and makes things harder again. So I think it's really incredible in that sort of grand scheme of things that y'all have managed to still retain a union in general, right? To still build, right? And to still kind of have people invested enough in the future of educators in this district to actually flip 2 school board seats. Like, that's pretty incredible, right? And so I guess I wanted to kind of ask, you know, looking forward, like, where the two of you and your coworkers and this community feel the building needs to happen and what needs to be done to really kind of restore that power among the workers in Hortonville.
I feel like we're on the right track. I feel like our union's been very active with, of course, getting those 2 school board members voted in. And we have a new superintendent who's been with us maybe 3 years.
4, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe 4. But he's done a phenomenal job. His hands have been tied with a few things, and he's making up for lost time. But he has been honest, and he's very transparent. He came to us and said, what do you need from us? And the first thing I said was, we just need transparency. Like, we need to know that we're all on the same page. And he has honored that since day one. But he also lives in the community. So in all areas, he's invested too. So he wants everyone to succeed. So when we started talking to him, because our union would meet with him once a month, and by union I meant our one representative would go and meet. He was open to our ideas and talking about those things. Around the same time, we had started the path with our professional learning communities, and that had been going very well and strong. And so he's honored all those conversations, and he has always tried to do the best thing and the right thing by teachers and for kids, and lives our mission about moving all kids forward, learning at the highest levels. And even during this year, like during COVID, when we teachers were like, this is too much. Like, you cannot have us there's not enough hours in a day where we can teach kids virtually and have a separate class for them, and then teach these 8 hours of kids here. And then also worry about the kids that are quarantining back and forth and assessing and having that all on. And he was one who offered grace. We got you. And right away he said, what do you need? And he listened. And he was probably, for me, the first superintendent who listened and then followed through. So we said, we need more time. We need time to prepare those extra things. So they changed all of our early release days, where we had professional development. They canceled the professional development for the entire school year and gave us that time for planning, so we could plan for our virtual students and for assessments and catching kids up who are quarantined. When they started offering the COVID testing at the building site, so that our teachers could be tested quickly and return back to work quicker, he said he was going to do the testing. He didn't want anyone else to be exposed. So he said, I will do the testing. He gowned up every day or 3 days a week when they were doing it. So he has always been there on the forefront to make sure he was fighting for teachers and kids and the community. And I think that's because this is his town too. He's here for us.
Jeff, do you have any thoughts on like the union side of it?
Yeah, I mean, he's made it easier just to be able to communicate with him, so, we could, like Amanda said, we could actually go to him and he would listen to us as a, HFT member. And he would always ask, when there was grievances or anything with a teacher, he would make sure, you can have a union representative with you. So he was good in that aspect. It's a lot different than pre-Act 10 as far as just being able to, like I said earlier, negotiating with the school board, but with anything contractual. But he has made some things work, like we'd be able to talk about the handbook with him, or, but he's, he just makes sure, we can't talk about anything contract with, but, so he's done a nice job with that. So
I think he's tried to balance things out.
Yes.
He knows how much we've lost. So he's developed the handbook committee where there's representation from every building and level. He also...
And he made sure that there was HFT representative on that handbook, and not, because not everybody's on the union, but, so he tried to make sure, like I was on there, and tried to make sure some other teachers were on there. And so that's been nice. And he's willing to listen on that, So I think it's helped a lot having a superintendent that will listen. He doesn't have to.
That's the thing. He knows he doesn't have to. He's doing it, so he's offering that in good faith, and he knows that we're coming to him in good faith. He also developed like an executive leadership team, which also has representation from each building. And that's too where he asks, like, what do you need? What are your teachers saying in your building? So I think, like, it used to be years ago, that was the union saying, this is what all of our teachers want and need, because most of our teachers were in the union. And now because our numbers are low past post Act 10, he's created this other committee, but he's been good about who he has selected to be on there, or he even asks, volunteers. But he makes sure that there's a good variety of people with different viewpoints. Early young teachers and veteran teachers all the way up. So he's able to communicate and collaborate with everyone. There's one more, but I couldn't think of it. One more thing that he did like that. Oh, and then the listening sessions. So he also has the listening sessions, and he'll sit down for 2 hours and ask teachers what they need. And if he has answers right then, he'll give them to you. And if not, he will say, I will get back to you on that. The same with the union, when Penelope, who's our union president, goes with him and talks each month, and she says, black and white, like, this is the question, you need to answer me. He will respond and answer. Where other years, other superintendents, we got the back and forth or whatever, but he's been very honest and will give answers right away and talk it through. He's not dodging the bullet on anything. Like, he's facing it all. Yeah, he's doing the hard things.
I think the biggest thing is being able to communicate with new teachers that come in, and they don't see the value a lot of times with a union, because they see, I got to pay so much dues a month, and they can't afford that. Or, they think it's, and I always look at it, to me, it's insurance. I mean, if something happens, I want the union's backing that, obviously there's things that if you do as a teacher, there's nothing the union can do for you. It's if you're that bad at something,
or if you're doing something illegal, you should not be teaching.
You should not be teaching.
As with any position.
Right. So, I mean, if something comes up with a student, or, I just feel a little, it's like insurance. I mean, I feel safe that the union lawyer, I have a union lawyer to be able to help me out or answer questions.
The other thing we keep, we promote the union too, because we are veteran teachers, and, I have nieces and nephews that are in education now, and they don't know the difference if someone's not telling them.
Right.
So I don't want them to be 25, 27 now in teaching, and then their unions kind of fall to the wayside, and then in their age 40, and there's not a union to help them because no one kept it up. Because the only reason they have all these rights and great things is because people are working toward it every year. So I feel it's our responsibility to keep educating them and promoting our union so that it continues to go. Because
just like my dad was a factory worker and he had a union, and I mean, really, that's how you get things done. I mean, you get your, anything safety related, or, to make sure you get your breaks and that. I mean, he was, or pensions or anything like that. I mean,
or time off or whatever, weekends or
you got to have a
family.
union backing to help you, because not everybody can advocate for themselves. I mean, you can't have, like a district, I don't know, it's like 250, 60 teachers. You can't have everyone on their own and just say, especially new teachers, say, oh, I need this. Well, it's a lot easier to do when you have a big membership to help you out, compared to going on your own. It's just, it can't be done.
Yeah. So in our district, again, another positive for our superintendent is we as a local union asked our superintendent if we could have time during those first 4 in-service days when the school year starts, and you usually have professional development in that. We asked him if we could use a 2-hour time slot to welcome new teachers, teach them about the union, tell them what we're about, the importance, and then get them signed up for the union. And they've allowed that. So, and they've even offered.
Except this year.
This year because of COVID, no.
Yeah.
Things have been off the table this year. Everyone's just trying to survive the year.
Yeah.
But I know that next year when we say, okay, can we use an hour or two, they would be like, so I like that because they know where we stand, we know where they stand, and no one feels threatened. We've both been transparent on both ends, and it's a mutual respect.